They moved into our guest cottage temporarily. That was 4 years ago. Yesterday, my son told my wife, "If you don't like the darts, leave." Then he snapped at our grandson for hugging me first. My daughter-in-law said nothing. That night, I sat at the kitchen table and wrote the letter I'd been holding back for 5 years. My name is Henry. I'm 68 years old. I live in a small cabin on Lake Minnetonka, Minnesota, with my wife Carol. We bought the place 30 years ago when we still had hair to pull and knees that didn't bark every time we stood up. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours. Quiet. Predictable. That's exactly how I liked it. Our days were slow, simple. I spent my mornings fixing up little things around the property, gutters, window latches, that kind of thing. Carol liked birdwatching and had a book full of check marks to prove it. We'd have breakfast together on the porch most days, play chess in the evenings, and on Sundays, she'd make sourdough pancakes while I brewed coffee so strong it could clean an engine block. I thought we'd earned this rhythm. After all those years working as a mechanic, raising a kid, paying off the house, I figured the hard part was over. Then Darren called. It was late April, still cold enough that the lake looked like broken glass in the morning. I remember Carol had just made soup, potato leek. She always made too much and insisted we'd find someone to eat it. The phone rang, and she answered with that cheerful hello she used with everyone, like life was still full of good surprises. "Darren," she mouthed to me, lighting up. I stayed quiet, just nodded and kept drying the dishes. But after about a minute, I heard her tone change. "Oh, honey, that's awful." "No, of course, we'll figure something out." I didn't need to hear more. My gut told me the storm was already rolling in. When she hung up, she turned to me with that hopeful, worried look she used to give Darren when he came home with a report card full of C's. "His boutique went under," she said. "Leanne just had the baby, Milo, and they're out of options." I stayed quiet. She waited for me to say something. "They need a place to stay. Just for a little while." I leaned against the counter and exhaled through my nose. "Carol." I know. But Henry, it's Darren." That was always her trump card. Darren was our only child. The boy we poured everything into, even when he gave very little back. He'd always had these big ideas, selling sneakers, opening a boutique, hosting pop-up events, and none of them stuck. But Carol loved him with a kind of softness I couldn't always understand. To her, he was still the boy who scraped his knee and asked for a hug. To me, he was a man in his 30s with another failed business and a fresh mouth to feed. "He said it'll just be a month or two," Carol added. I looked out the window toward the guest cottage we'd fixed up a few summers ago. It had been meant for visitors' short stays, the occasional niece or nephew passing through. Not a family of 3. But I nodded. "All right. For now." Carol crossed the kitchen and hugged me tight. "Thank you." I didn't hug back right away. My arms stayed at my sides for a moment. Then I folded them around her. She smelled like rosemary and soup. A week later, Darren's old SUV pulled into our gravel driveway, tires crunching like the opening act of something we couldn't stop. Leanne climbed out holding baby Milo in a wrap across her chest. She looked exhausted. Darren waved like nothing was wrong. I watched from the porch as Carol rushed down the steps to greet them. "We're so glad you're here," she said, ushering them toward the guest cottage. Darren grinned. "Yeah, just until we get on our feet." I caught that. I also caught the glint in his eyes, like he already knew we'd never say no. They moved in that afternoon. Carol made them dinner and showed Leanne how to use the old laundry setup in the garage. Darren brought over a few boxes and asked if he could borrow my ladder. "It's just temporary," he said again that night at the dinner table. I nodded and sipped my water. But something in my gut told me the quiet we'd worked so hard for wasn't just interrupted. It was over. That first month came and went faster than I expected. Then the next. And by the time the maple leaves turned yellow and brittle, Darren and Leanne were still in the guest cottage like they owned the deed. I didn't say anything at first. Carol kept insisting they were settling in, like we were running a bed and breakfast and not just 2 retirees trying to enjoy some peace before our knees gave out. But things started to change. Not all at once. Not in a dramatic way. Just inch by inch. At first, it was the groceries. I noticed we were going through milk faster. Eggs, bread, butter, things I swore we bought just the day before would be gone by the next morning. I'd open the fridge and mutter, that's odd." Carol would shrug and say maybe we forgot we used them. We didn't. Then it was the baby. Milo had turned into a toddler before our eyes. He was walking wobbling, mostly, but mobile. And curious. He'd wander into our part of the yard while I was trimming hedges, his little hands covered in dirt or peanut butter. Once, I caught him trying to pet a snapping turtle near the waterline. No one noticed he was gone until Carol shouted, "Where's Milo?" He was 3 feet from the lake. I scooped him up before anything could happen, but it rattled me. When I brought him back to the cottage, Leanne was sitting on the couch, scrolling her phone. Didn't even look up when I opened the door. "He was at the water," I said. "Oh," she mumbled. "He loves it down there." "Yeah, well, maybe you shouldn't go alone." She made a vague noise, like I'd just asked her to turn down the TV, and went right back to her screen. Carol still tried to make the best of things. She was always cooking now more than usual. I'd walk into the kitchen and find her sweating over a hot stove, trying to make enough food for 5 people with the same ingredients we used for 2. She started buying those bulk bags of rice, stocking up like it was the Great Depression all over again. You don't have to do all this, I told her once, watching her ladle soup into a plastic container. She looked tired. It's just easier if I cook for everyone. Is it? I asked. She paused for a beat, then said, Darren's under a lot of pressure. I don't want him to feel like a burden. The problem was he didn't. If Darren felt guilty, he didn't show it. Most mornings, he'd wander over around 10 or 11, coffee in hand, wearing athletic gear he didn't sweat in. Sometimes he'd talk about starting a podcast or reselling vintage outdoors equipment. One afternoon, I saw a package on the porch addressed to him. It was a brand new crossbow. An investment in my mental health, he said when I asked about it. I blinked. You plan on hunting? He smirked. Nah, just target shooting. Keeps me grounded. That was when I realized he didn't just think he was staying here. He thought he was thriving here. Later that week, I walked into the garage and saw a dartboard nailed to the far wall. One of mine, the old cork ones I used to take to game night at the lodge. Darts were sticking out of it, one sunk into the drywall just left of center. Carol came in behind me, holding a bag of groceries. Oh, Darren said he needed something to do in the evenings. He's got a baby, I said. That's something to do. That night, I sat on the porch, listening to the thunk-thunk of darts hitting the board while Carol rocked in her chair beside me. Neither of us said anything for a while. Did you notice the chips are gone again? I asked quietly. Carol let out a soft sigh. I'll get more tomorrow. The next morning, I opened the fridge and found a half-eaten sandwich inside, my name still on the container. I didn't say anything. I just threw it in the trash. It wasn't the sandwich. It was the pattern. The slow, creeping erosion of boundaries. The way Darren took without asking. The way Leanne stared at her phone while her kid nearly drowned. The way Carol tried to cover it all up with casseroles and soft excuses. That evening, I sat on the porch alone while Carol gave Milo a bath inside the cottage. I could hear her singing through the window, something sweet and old from when Darren was a boy. I looked out at the lake. It was calm, flat as glass. You'd never know anything was wrong just by looking at it. But under the surface, things had started to rot. And I wasn't sure how much longer I could ignore the smell. It started with crayons. I was out by the shed fixing a hinge when I heard little footsteps pattering across the gravel. I looked up, and there was Milo, holding a folded piece of construction paper, smudged with blue and green marker. His hair was sticking up in every direction, and his shirt had a chocolate stain down the front. Papa Bear, he called out with a grin. I made this for you and Mama Carol. He handed me the drawing like it was a Picasso. It was mostly scribbles, what looked like a stick figure with gray hair standing next to a brown house with wavy lines for water. In shaky kid handwriting, it said, I love you. Carol came out of the garden when she heard the commotion and knelt beside him. This is beautiful, she said, genuinely touched. You made this for us? Milo nodded proudly. You're my Mama Carol. Before I could respond, I heard a door slam. Darren came stomping down the path from the cottage, face twisted in a way I hadn't seen before. Milo, he snapped. What did I say about running over here without telling us? Milo looked down, instantly small and quiet. Carol instinctively pulled him a little closer, but Darren was already there. You can't just let him wander. Okay, he said, voice sharp and rising. You don't get to act like his parents. Carol stood up slowly. He brought us a drawing, Darren. He wasn't hurting anyone. Yeah, well, if the noise bothers you so much, he said, turning to her now, you can always leave. Silence. I took a step forward, trying to stay calm. That's not necessary. No, Darren barked, pointing a finger in Carol's face. I'm sick of the passive-aggressive crap. You think I don't notice? The looks, the size, the little comments? You resent us being here? Say it. Carol's mouth opened, then closed. She looked at Milo, who was now clutching her pant leg. I think, she said carefully, we've all been trying very hard to make this work. Darren shook his head, laughing bitterly. Unbelievable. He turned on his heel and stormed back to the cottage, slamming the door behind him so hard a wind chime fell off the hook. Milo started crying. Carol knelt to comfort him, whispering softly while I stood there, fists clenched so tight my knuckles turned white. That afternoon, Carol didn't speak much. She put on the kettle and sat in the kitchen staring out the window as if she could see something far off that might make this make sense. I didn't have her patience. That night, after the house had gone quiet, I sat at the kitchen table with a yellow legal pad and wrote a letter. It wasn't angry. It wasn't dramatic. It was just the truth. Darren, this arrangement has gone far beyond what was originally agreed. You and your family have been living here for over a year now, rent-free, supported by your mother's cooking, my groceries, and a kindness that's being stretched to its breaking point. We welcomed you with the hope that this would be temporary. It's become permanent without any discussion, without respect, and frankly, without gratitude. I can no longer continue like this. You have until the end of next month to vacate the guest cottage. This is non-negotiable. If you refuse to leave, I will pursue legal avenues to have you removed. We still love you. But this is not love. This is enabling. Dad. I folded the note, placed it on the breakfast table where Darren always grabbed his morning coffee, and went to bed. Carol was already lying down. I got in beside her, but neither of us spoke. We just lay there in the dark, listening to the house creak and settle. She reached over and took my hand, held it tight, and we both waited for the morning. The next morning, the air in the kitchen felt thicker than usual. Carol was stirring oatmeal, but her hand moved slower, like even she didn't want to be in the room when Darren came through that door. I sipped my coffee and waited. The letter sat right where I'd left it, center of the table, yellow paper folded clean and flat. At exactly 8:12 a.m., Darren walked in, shirtless, rubbing sleep from his eyes. He saw the paper, hesitated, then picked it up and opened it with one hand, the other still wrapped around his coffee mug. As his eyes scanned the lines, the air turned electric. Leanne walked in behind him, already dressed, dark circles under her eyes like she hadn't slept at all. She noticed the letter in his hands and stopped. When he finished reading, Darren tossed the paper onto the table like it was junk mail. Well, he said flatly, isn't that nice? Leanne said nothing. She picked up Milo, who had wandered in with a plastic truck in one hand, and carried him back out to the cottage without a word. Carol stayed by the stove, frozen. Darren looked at me. So that's it? A letter? No conversation, just a deadline. I didn't think there was anything left to say, I replied calmly. He scoffed. You really think you're going to kick us out? You're throwing your own son and grandson onto the street. You said it would be a month, I said. It's been a year. And you think life's just that simple, huh? He snapped. I can't just magically make a job appear. Leanne's not working. We have a toddler. I didn't say it was simple. I said it was time. He stepped forward. You do realize if we leave, we have nowhere to go. No money, no backup plan. You're setting us up to fail. You set yourself up to fail, I said, keeping my voice even. We just let it go on too long. For a moment, I thought he was going to explode again. But instead, he just muttered something under his breath and walked out. Carol and I stood in the kitchen, not saying anything for a long while. 3 days passed. Not a word from Darren. Not a thank you. Not a sorry. Just silence. And then, on a Thursday evening, Carol opened the fridge and stood there for a beat longer than usual. We had roast chicken last night, right? She asked quietly. Yeah, I said. Leftovers should be in the Tupperware. They're not. I walked over and looked. Empty shelf. Clean container in the sink. Rinsed, but not washed. The one with my name written on masking tape across the lid. Are you kidding me? I said. Carol didn't say anything. She just stood there with her arms folded, like she was trying to keep herself together. That was the last straw. I marched down the gravel path toward the cottage and didn't even knock. Darren was inside watching TV with his feet up on the coffee table, a can of something light in one hand. You ate our dinner, I said bluntly. He didn't even look over. It was just sitting there. I figured no one wanted it. It had my name on it. He shrugged. Man, you're really going to lose it over some chicken? I'm losing it, I said, over your total lack of respect. Oh, here we go, he groaned. Dad's speech hour. No speech, I said, stepping fully into the room. One final warning. You take one more thing that isn't yours, food, tools, peace, and you're gone before the month's end. You hear me? He finally looked at me. What are you going to do? Call the cops on your own son. If I have to, I said. Yes. He laughed, but it was bitter. You're unbelievable. You're ungrateful, I said. And out of time. That night, back at the house, Carol poured 2 glasses of wine and handed one to me. I didn't think it would come to this, she said quietly. I did, I replied. She took a sip. I used to think if I just gave enough, meals, kindness, patience, he'd find his way back to the boy he used to be. I looked at her. He's not that boy anymore. Carol stared into her wine glass. No, he isn't. And for the first time in a year, I saw it in her eyes. She was done smoothing things over. Done hoping. Done pretending. It wasn't just me setting a deadline now. It was both of us. It happened in the hallway. Carol had gone over to the garage to get paper towels. We kept the extra rolls in the supply cabinet out there, since Milo had started using them like toys. I was in the living room, trying to find the manual for our ancient leaf blower, when I heard the voices. They weren't yelling, just low enough to sound civil, but sharp enough to catch my attention. I stepped to the hallway and froze. Darren had followed Carol back from the garage and stopped her in the narrow passage between the laundry nook and the back door. You guys act like this place only belongs to you, he said, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. But we've been here a year. We've made this home too. Carol looked rattled. She held the paper towel pack close to her chest like a shield. Darren, I I didn't say it wasn't yours to share while you're here. But you were supposed to be leaving. He leaned in slightly, not touching her, but crowding her in a way that made my fists clench from 20 feet away. We're not just guests anymore, Mom. This is our home too. Milo was practically raised here. So maybe you should start thinking twice before acting like you can throw us out. I stepped in before I could even think it through. Back up. Darren turned around, startled but not apologetic. What? You heard me, I said. Back. Up. He glanced at Carol, then back at me. I was just talking. From where I'm standing, it looked more like threatening, I snapped. And it ends now. Carol wouldn't meet my eyes, but I saw her knuckles, white against the plastic pack in her hands. That night, after Darren retreated to the cottage, I sat with Carol on the couch. She hadn't said much since dinner. I figured she needed time. But then she turned to me, quiet as a whisper, and said, I didn't like the way he looked at me. It scared me. I nodded. Me too. There was a long pause. I kept thinking, she added, if I said the wrong thing, he'd snap. That was it. That was the moment everything we'd ignored, every boundary crossed, every time we told ourselves it was just stress or bad luck coalesced into something we couldn't excuse anymore. I called my old friend Tom early the next morning. He practiced real estate law for 30 years before retiring to Arizona, and he didn't waste time with small talk. He's been there how long? Tom asked. 14 months, I said. And you never asked them for rent? Never had them sign anything? No. It was supposed to be temporary. Tom sighed. Doesn't matter. Minnesota law is clear. If they've lived there more than 30 days, they've got tenant rights. You'll have to serve formal notice. Might need to file with the county if they refuse. Even though I'd suspected that much, hearing it out loud made my stomach turn. They've got rights, I muttered. Yes, Tom said. But so do you. That afternoon, I printed the paperwork from the county website. Carol stood behind me at the kitchen counter, reading over my shoulder. She didn't say anything when I clipped the notice to a clipboard and walked down to the cottage. Leanne opened the door. Her face looked like she hadn't slept. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her lips tight. I didn't ask where Darren was. This is the formal eviction notice, I said, handing it to her. You're being given until the end of the month to vacate the premises. If you don't, we'll take it to court. She nodded slowly, looking down at the papers. Okay. She didn't argue. She didn't ask why. She just nodded. As I turned to walk back to the house, she whispered, I'm sorry. I paused but didn't turn around. Back inside, I put the clipboard down on the kitchen table and poured myself a glass of water. My hands were trembling. Carol was wiping the sink, but she stopped. Did you give it to them? I nodded. Leanne took it. Said she's sorry. Carol swallowed hard and turned to me. Can I tell you something? Of course. I think I knew this would happen, she said. Maybe not like this, but I think part of me knew. The moment he said they needed a place to stay, I reached for her hand. We did what we thought was right. No, she said. We did what we thought was kind. And we mistook the two. She looked at me then, really looked at me, and I could see it in her eyes. The hope that had kept her going for a year was gone. What was left was something sharper, stronger. Resolve. We were done playing host. Now, we were taking our home back. It started with the Wi-Fi. One morning, I sat down with my coffee and the crossword, only to find my tablet wouldn't load the news. Carol tried to open her birdwatching app, nothing. Even the weather widget sat there, frozen on last Tuesday. Router's probably acting up again, I muttered, heading to the hallway cabinet where we kept it tucked away. Except it wasn't there. The shelf was empty. I checked the cords. The power strip. Everything was unplugged. Carol stood behind me. Maybe Darren was fiddling with it? I already knew the answer. Sure enough, when I walked down to the cottage and peeked through the screen door, there it was, the router sitting neatly on their end table, lights blinking green like a little hostage. Darren sat on the couch, playing a video game, headphones on. Leanne was scrolling on her phone, Milo tapping away at a tablet. I knocked hard. Darren pulled off the headphones. What? The router. Put it back. He shrugged. Signal's stronger down here. It doesn't belong to you. He grinned. Well, technically, we're tenants now. You serve us papers. We start living like it. Try me, I snapped. Put it back. Now. He leaned back like he had all the time in the world. Or what? You gonna write another note? That night, I locked the router in our bedroom and changed every password we had, Wi-Fi, streaming, even the smart thermostat app Darren had installed without asking. The next morning, he left a note taped to the cottage door. Passive-aggressive much? I didn't respond. But the line had been crossed. Again. 2 days later, Carol got a call from the elementary school down the road. I found her at the dining table, her face pale, her hand gripping the receiver like it was a lifeline. She looked at me and mouthed, Milo's teacher. When she hung up, she just sat there, blinking. What is it? I asked. Milo's been crying in class, she said. He told his teacher he's scared they're going to live in a tent. That his daddy says grandpa's kicking them out because they're not wanted. I sat down across from her, feeling the weight of it drop like a stone in my gut. He's 5, she whispered, and he thinks he's about to be homeless. We sat in silence for a while. The late afternoon sun came through the window, casting stripes across the wood floor. I could hear a blue jay calling from the birch outside. Carol finally spoke. They have no plan, Henry. None. They were never planning to leave. I know. They're not saving. They're not looking. Darren won't even go on interviews. He just sits. I know. She looked at me then, and her voice cracked. If we give them one more inch, we'll never get our life back. I reached across the table and took her hand. We're not giving them anything else. She nodded, and I could see the shift. The fear was still there, but beneath it, something new. Firmness. Darren had crossed every boundary, taken every kindness as permission, and now he was dragging a child into the emotional fallout of his failures. That night, as Carol made tea and I double-checked the locks, I walked past the guest bedroom and paused. On the wall next to the door, still taped up, was one of Milo's crayon drawings. A stick figure with 2 tall shapes beside it, one labeled Mama Carol, the other Papa Bear. They were all holding hands. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I shut the door. Whatever it took, however hard it would get, we weren't going back. They needed to leave. And this time, nothing was going to stop us. The first time I met Sherry, Carol's old college friend, was at our wedding 42 years ago. She'd been the loud one back then, full of opinions and stories about backpacking through Oregon or marching on Washington. She wore purple to the reception, not out of protest, but just because she liked it. When she came to visit that summer, it was on short notice. She's in town for a week, Carol said, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Says she wants to catch up. I didn't question it. We needed a little outside air in the house. Sherry showed up in a bright linen top and thick-rimmed glasses, giving Carol the kind of hug that made you forget how long it had been. She hugged me too, and for a second, I remembered what it felt like to have someone visit who didn't bring tension with them. We had lemonade on the porch, the 3 of us. Milo was napping, and the cottage was quiet for once. How's retirement treating you? Sherry asked with a smirk. I chuckled. Depends on the day. Carol didn't say much. I could tell something was on her mind. Later, when I went inside to fix the screen door latch that kept sticking, they stayed out on the porch, talking low and serious. I didn't eavesdrop. I didn't need to. Carol came inside just before dinner, eyes a little puffy. Not from crying. Exactly. More like too much remembering. What did she say? I asked. Carol leaned against the counter and sighed. Everything I already knew. Just out loud. She sat down, folded her hands in her lap. Darren's controlling, she said. Always has been. But Sherry saw it firsthand. Said Leon used to have friends, hobbies. Used to laugh. And now? Carol looked down. Now she only talks when he's not in the room. I nodded slowly. I had seen it too. The way Leanne flinched when Darren raised his voice. The way she never made eye contact during an argument. The way she always acted like a ghost floating behind him. Sherry offered to take her in, Carol added. Her and Milo. If she ever wants out. I leaned against the counter next to her. Does she? Carol looked up at me. I don't know, but I wrote her a letter. I blinked. You what? A real letter, she said. Tucked it inside a library book she saw me reading last week. I figured she might come back to borrow it. She paused. I told her we'd help. If she ever decided to leave. That night, just after 9, I saw Leanne sitting on the cottage porch. Alone. No phone. No Milo. Just her and the stars and that book on her lap. She sat there a long time. No lights on behind her. No Darren. Just a porch light and silence. From our kitchen window, I watched her read. Or maybe just stare at the pages. Her thumb tucked into the middle, holding the book open. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She didn't run or shout or break down. But she didn't go back inside for over an hour. I didn't know if she'd read the letter yet. But I knew this much. Something had shifted. There was a crack in the dam now. And sometimes, all it takes is a little pressure for everything to break open. The knock came just before sunrise. I was up early like usual, sitting in the kitchen with a mug of coffee, watching the steam curl in the morning light. Carol was still in bed. The lake outside was calm, the kind of stillness you get only once in a while, before the wind kicks up, before the day starts clawing at you. I heard footsteps on the porch, then a soft knock. When I opened the door, Leanne was standing there in her coat, Milo pressed against her leg, clutching a backpack. She had a rolling suitcase in her other hand. Her eyes were puffy, but clear, her lips trembling, but set. Is it okay? She asked, voice barely audible. If we wait here for Sherry? I opened the screen and stepped aside. Come in. Carol was awake within minutes, wrapping Milo in a blanket and settling him on the couch with a banana and a cartoon. She didn't ask questions, just sat beside Leanne and held her hand. No words, just pressure. Quiet understanding. 10 minutes later, we heard Darren yelling. At first, just his voice echoing down the gravel path. Then the unmistakable sound of the cottage door slamming open. "Leanne," he bellowed. "Are you kidding me? You really think this is how it works?" I walked out onto the porch and stood there, arms folded. He was charging up the path, barefoot, still in pajama pants, waving his arms like some lunatic denied his morning paper. "You think you can just take off with my kid?" he shouted. "In the middle of the night?" "She didn't take anything," I said calmly. "She left." "Don't start with me," he snapped. "You think I don't know this was your idea? You've been poisoning her against me since day one." "No, Darren. You did that all by yourself." His face twisted. "You're not going to keep my son from me. No one's keeping anything. She made a choice." He took a step closer, like he wanted to argue, or maybe shove past me. That's when the cruiser pulled up. Darren stopped in his tracks. The blue lights flicked once, briefly, before the officer stepped out. Officer Melendez, same one who'd patrolled this area for years. We'd seen her at the gas station plenty of times, always friendly. "Sir," she called, walking toward us, one hand on her belt. "You need to calm down and step back from the property." Darren turned, startled. "What the hell is this?" "I'm here to inform you that a temporary protective order has been filed," she said evenly. "You'll need to gather your things and avoid contact with Ms. Leanne Morris and the minor child until a hearing determines the next steps." He blinked. "A what?" "A restraining order," I said. "Sherry helped her file it yesterday." Darren looked between me, the cop, and the house. "She's not serious," he said. "You can't just, this is my family." "You should have thought about that," I said. He looked like he was about to say more. But then he saw Leanne standing in the doorway, holding Milo, her arms wrapped around him like a shield. She didn't cry, didn't flinch. She just looked at him. And that was what broke him. Not the cop. Not me. Not even the legal notice. It was the quiet of that look. The finality of it. He turned away. Officer Melendez followed him back to the cottage so he could pack a few things. No handcuffs, not yet. Just supervision. Just limits. By the time Sherry's car pulled into the drive, Leanne was already standing at the edge of the porch with Milo's coat zipped up and a small duffel bag in her hand. Carol hugged her so tightly I thought they'd both start sobbing. But Leanne held it together. Kissed Carol's cheek. Looked at me. "Thank you," she said. "For everything." I nodded. "You don't have to thank us. Just stay safe." She climbed into the back seat with Milo, and Sherry gave us both a knowing look before backing out onto the road. We stood there long after they were gone. The lake was still again. Carol leaned her head on my shoulder. "Do you think he'll come back?" I reached into my pocket and held up the second paper I'd served Darren 2 days ago, the formal eviction notice. "If he does," I said, "he won't get past the mailbox." And for the first time in over a year, I meant every word. Because the storm had passed, and we were still standing. It had been 2 quiet weeks. The kind of quiet that isn't just the absence of noise, but the absence of tension. The kind that settles into the walls, the floorboards, the air itself. Carol had started baking again, little batches of blueberry muffins and walnut bread. I'd gone back to fixing things just because I could, not because someone broke them. Then the envelope came. It was from a pawn shop on the far side of town. Addressed to Henry and Carol Morris, no return address beyond the shop's name. Carol opened it while we were cleaning out the guest cottage. Her face went pale. "Henry, you need to see this." Inside was a note from the shop owner, along with a list of items, a gold pocket watch engraved with my father's initials, a silver locket that belonged to Carol's grandmother, and 2 sets of vintage tools, one of them mine. The kind you don't find in hardware stores anymore. Apparently, someone tried pawning them off last Thursday, but the clerk recognized the family name engraved on the back of the locket and got suspicious. Figured I'd check. The note read. Didn't feel right. I stood there in the guest house doorway, the smell of dust and old detergent thick in the air, and felt my whole body go tight. He'd stolen from us. Not just freeloaded. Not just lied or mooched or pushed. He had taken what wasn't his. I called Officer Melendez that afternoon. She met me at the pawn shop, clipboard in hand. The owner showed us security footage. It was Darren, clear as day. Hat pulled low, sunglasses on, but him. He looked relaxed. Smug, even. I filed a police report. That same night, just before 11, our motion light out by the dock flicked on. I grabbed the flashlight and stepped out onto the porch. Carol followed behind me in her robe, phone in hand. I scanned the yard. There, near the far edge of the cottage, was a rolled-up sleeping bag and a duffel bag tucked under the eaves. He'd been sleeping there. For who knows how long. Not in the house. Not in a hotel. Just circling like a vulture, waiting, hiding. I didn't call out. I called the police. By the time the cruiser pulled up, Darren was already gone, must have seen the lights and bolted. But they found the sleeping bag. The bag of clothes. A half-eaten granola bar with his brand of chew marks. It was enough. The officer returned a week later to let us know Darren had been picked up outside a gas station, petty theft, trespassing, and violating a protective order. Carol didn't say anything when she heard. She just exhaled, long and deep. That weekend, we finished cleaning out the guest house. We opened the windows, let in the breeze. I patched drywall where Darren's dartboard had once hung, and Carol replaced the curtains with ones we'd stored for years, light cotton with little blue stripes. We repainted the porch railing. We brought in fresh linens. It wasn't about the house, really. It was about the space. About reclaiming something we'd given away too freely. By the end of the month, the place looked like it used to. No more piles of toys. No more half-burnt candles or forgotten laundry. Just a clean, quiet space again. On our fridge, one of Milo's old drawings still hung. Mama Carol and Papa Bear holding hands with a little stick figure boy. The edges were curling now, faded from time and sunlight. But we left it there, because not everything that came from that time was a loss. Some of it, just a sliver, was love. It's been a year now. The seasons came and went, each one peeling away another layer of what we'd been through. The lake froze, then thawed. The trees bloomed, dropped their leaves, and bloomed again. And through it all, we kept living. Leanne stayed true to her word. She took the job at Sherry's daycare just a month after leaving. Started slow, 2 days a week, then 4. Now she's full-time, managing the place like she's been doing it her whole life. You can see it in how she talks, the way her back's a little straighter, her laugh louder. She filed for full custody of Milo back in March. Darren didn't contest it. Last we heard, he skipped town. No address, no job, no claims. Gone. It was a quiet vanishing, and maybe the best ending he was capable of. Milo still visits us every other weekend. Sherry drops him off Saturday mornings with a little backpack, and he runs straight for Carol's arms, shouting, "Mama Carol," before squeezing her like he hasn't seen her in months. Then it's my turn, Papa Bear, and he barrels into me with all the strength a 6-year-old can muster. We have a routine now. Saturdays are pancakes. Walks down to the dock. Sometimes we fish. He never catches anything, but he says it's the trying that's fun. Sundays are crafts and Carol's photo albums. He points to the wedding pictures and always asks, "Was I there for this?" Carol laughs and says, "Almost." When he goes home Sunday evenings, the house is quiet again. But it's not the kind of quiet we used to fear, the one that felt like waiting for the other shoe to drop. This is the good kind. The kind that lets you hear the wind in the trees. The hoot of an owl. The way Carol hums when she folds laundry. Sometimes, when I walk past the guest house, I stop by the door and glance at the frame Carol hung beside it. It holds a single sheet of yellow legal paper. My letter. The one I wrote the morning everything changed. She had it matted and framed, right there on the wall for anyone to see. Not because it was poetic, not because it was brave, but because it was necessary. A reminder, Carol said, that peace kept through silence isn't peace at all. She's right. We used to think keeping the peace meant swallowing the discomfort, ignoring the signs, smiling through the chaos and telling ourselves it would pass. But now we know better. Now we know peace means setting boundaries, saying no, standing firm. Now we know what home really is. And every time Milo's little feet hit the gravel path, running toward our porch with open arms, I know. We got it back.